is the second installment of our interview with Leila around compliance in the Internet age. One of your areas of expertise is compliance. What are we seeing now from state regulators as well as the SEC in terms of where their focus is? What would you consider to be the low-hanging fruit that they're looking into and why?
Sure. So, one of the big issues for regulators is cybersecurity. There's a million examples of different companies, different large companies. Hell, our own government has been hacked. So cybersecurity is definitely a big focus. You want to make sure, especially in this day and age where so many advisors are utilizing different technology applications, are starting to utilize cloud-based providers to store their books and records. And when we're also looking at, very client-sensitive information, Social Security numbers, addresses, telephone numbers, things that are identifying and can be used to, say, apply for a credit card, gain access to a client's account. These are really important pieces of information that an advisor needs to provide services to their clients, but it's also making sure that the advisor is taking steps to protect that information. So it's not just about ensuring that you have a firewall in place or that you're using some sort of encryption when you're sending client-sensitive information like Social Security numbers, but it's also about testing your cybersecurity. It's about testing your systems and ensuring that you have the appropriate processes in place to respond if there is an attempted hack. So cybersecurity is a big issue, and just because you use different technology providers or applications doesn't mean you're off the hook either. You have an obligation as an advisor to do your due diligence on your cloud-based providers, on your technology platforms. And so one of the ways of meeting that requirement of doing your due diligence would be to request the cybersecurity policy for these different providers you use. If you're still using servers, you want to make sure you have backups to the backups. I know some firms have 3 or 4 different backups located in different areas so that if there is some sort of hack or issue that they have a backup of all of their information. Here in Georgia, we had our state government was attacked, and it was one of these guys who took the information and tried to hold it for ransom, asking the government to pay, a fixed amount of money to get all that information back. And you're seeing that done on other businesses, not only just large businesses, but small ones as well, where a hacker comes in and will steal information and block access, and requiring that person to pay a ransom essentially to get that information back. Whereas if you have all these different backups, you're kind of avoiding that. So cybersecurity is definitely a big issue. And then it's just easy stuff like just maintaining your books and records. Do you keep copies of canceled checks? I mean, yes, people still use checks, so do you still have copies of them? Are you maintaining investment management agreements? Are they up to date? Do they correctly reflect the actual fees that are being charged your clients? For SEC registered firms, are you doing your annual compliance review? It's really regulators. There are a lot of advisory firms out there. They are trying to conduct more examinations and do them more frequently, but they're not necessarily working with bigger budgets and more people. So they have to be more efficient in how they do these examinations. So if they want to really make sure that they are finding issues, they're going to go for the easy stuff. Did you do your annual compliance review? Have you read your compliance manual? Does it reflect what's actually happening in your business? Do you know what's in your compliance manual? Are you following the processes that you have documented? I can't tell you how many times an advisor comes to us after being fined by a regulator, and I ask them, well, what does your compliance manual say about this? And I have no idea. And I go look at the compliance manual, and it's a template, or it's an unfinished document. Literally, I've had a firm that had 300 million assets under management in business for over 20 years. They hadn't looked at their compliance manual in over 5 years, and there was literally brackets in the compliance manual where it said error or insert here, and it was built off of a template that they never completed building their compliance manual. So that's what they provided the regulators, and of course, they scoffed at it. So, did you do your best execution analysis? These are things that are easy to figure out. You just look at it. Regulators are going to ask for copies of client documents. They want to see the suitability information we discussed earlier. They want to see an investment management agreement, or whatever, agreement you may have in place. Maybe it's a financial planning agreement. They want to see you doing the basic stuff, because if you're not doing the basic stuff, they're going to assume you're not doing some of the more complex things in your business, like, a cybersecurity audit. So that's why they go after low-hanging fruit. It's really easy to see if a firm has a healthy compliance culture. If they're doing all the easy stuff, then, maybe look into stuff like cybersecurity. Do you have a business continuity plan? And then really determine, how far the compliance goes. So they're going to look at the easy stuff. That's the simplest way for them to determine if a firm is doing their job from a compliance perspective, and it doesn't require them to have a bigger budget or add more people to do that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So following along with that, what are the steps you recommend advisors take in the event they are contacted and or noticed of an upcoming audit by either state or federal regulators? How do you advise RIAs to move forward from that point?
Sure. So it really kind of depends on each firm. So there are, for the most part, most advisory firms, the CEO or the owner is also the CCO. And if they have no idea the last time they looked at their compliance manual, they probably want to go ahead as soon as they get the call or the email or the letter from the regulator that they're going to be audited or have an examination. They probably need to go ahead and call a lawyer, because it's, in all likelihood, there are going to be questions coming from the regulator. There are going to be documents requested that they're not going to have, because the owner/CCO already recognizes that he or she hasn't been doing what they're supposed to do. So I would say certainly at that point for that type of advisor. Now, for an advisor who has a healthy compliance culture, they don't necessarily have to have an attorney come in at the beginning, but it's good to have one on call. And actually, most regulators prefer that an advisory firm have an attorney available. Because most attorneys that specialize in this area of law have been through examinations. They know what to expect. They understand what examiners are looking for and can actually help to streamline the process and make it more efficient. So regulators like that an attorney can come in and improve the process by helping to make it more efficient and streamline it. Also, if there's an issue that comes up, an attorney can step in and try to mitigate any issues. Or, if an attorney determines that the request is too broad or inappropriate, may be able to push back on the regulator and have them more narrowly define what it is they're looking for, or, convince the regulator that they're not entitled to that information. Keeping in mind as well that when you have an attorney, those communications that you have with your attorney are subject to attorney-client privilege. So, if something comes up, you could have a very frank and open conversation with your attorney and it's privileged, and then your attorney can do what they need to do to make sure that any issues are mitigated to the best of their ability. Now, you don't always have to have an attorney there during a in-person examination. A lot of more examinations now start with an actual document request. It's not necessary in all circumstances for the attorney to be there at the beginning. But as you work through the document request, certainly if there are issues that are coming up or things you just don't have, you may want to get an attorney involved just so they can help mitigate from the beginning. Because ultimately what you want to avoid is actual documentation from a regulator of deficiencies. And the faster you can nip potential deficiencies in the bud in the front end before they're actually documented, the better.
Now that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about sort of compliance 101 for startup registered investment advisors. What are the pros and cons of doing compliance yourself versus outsourcing? And at what point does outsourcing make sense? Certainly over the last couple of minutes, you've outlined and detailed a very deep and seemingly increasingly complex environment. So I'm sure there are a lot of startup RIAs kind of, noodling with which way do they go. What are your thoughts on that?
So, you got to be practical. It's one thing if you start your own RIA and you're coming into the business with, 100 million assets under management. Yeah, it would be simpler for an advisor in that position to go ahead and engage someone who can to whom they can essentially outsource that compliance responsibility. Or actually hiring an outsourced CCO, Chief Compliance Officer, to do all of the compliance work, because it takes that off the plate. Now, that's not going to necessarily be practical for someone who has no book of business and decides to start their own RIA. True small business, entrepreneur, putting on all the hats and doing it themselves. It is going to take some time, and there are providers out there, certainly, non-law firm compliance providers. Keeping in mind these providers, while they may be very low cost, the way that model is profitable is that they have high volume. And so the way they keep low cost, high volume is they utilize templates. So it's not customized. You're not going to get a lot of one-on-one, hands-on assistance. And a lot of times these companies provide a technology platform where they have all their templates, but you are still doing all of the work. So I think it's responsible to either go and educate yourself and find out what your compliance responsibilities are and how to meet them, or if you think that's just going to be way beyond what you're willing to do, then you should hire a compliance consultant as soon as it's practical for your business.
So
keeping in mind, sure, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
Well, keeping in mind, again, that, you may start off with a lower cost provider, but that's not a guarantee against an issue in the future. We've had clients come to us who've used compliance consultants previously, go through a routine examination, have a bunch of deficiencies cited, and end up paying, a hefty fine. We had a client in Florida, which is a very fine, happy state, who was using the same compliance consultant for 10 years and ended up facing a $50,000 fine because of things the compliance provider was supposed to be doing but didn't. Now, this is a compliance consultant that was engaged and that was being paid $2,000 a year to do compliance. I asked my, client point blank, what did you think you were getting for $2,000 a year? Compliance takes time. It's time consuming. It's something that requires your time every week. And as your business grows, so does the amount of time you have to spend on compliance, doing ad hoc testing, ensuring your books and records are up to date, et cetera, et cetera. And your compliance responsibilities are the same, whether you have 1 million in AUM, 100 million, or $1 billion in AUM. So that
sounds a little bit like you get what you pay for. Is that right?
It does. It does. I mean, yeah, you do. And I think for a lot of advisors who come to us, it's a false sense of security, a false sense that things are getting done. But again, those models are low cost, high volume, template heavy, no customization. Sure. And one of the deficiencies that gets cited by a lot of examiners is that their compliance is not structured around what's happening in their business. It's not customized. And it's just a template document that sometimes has the wrong firm name in it, has policies and procedures for things that the business doesn't do. It just doesn't make sense. So my recommendation is, if you're going to utilize one of those providers, make sure you're doing the work and customizing it. And then when it's practical, find a provider that's going to do, the old-fashioned get on the phone, have conversations with you, customize the work, and really ensure that when you have your examination, not if, but when you do, that your compliance culture is going to be healthy, robust, and it's going to satisfy your examiner.
So how would you advise or guide advisors in terms of how they should be evaluating a provider in this case?
Well, certainly I would talk to whoever your assigned, compliance consultant would be. Learn more about their background, what kind of experience they have, ask questions about, what your responsibilities are as a advisor, and just listen to how they respond. You also want to ask about their templates. You want to ask about, if they've had any regulator issues, if any of their clients have faced any fines or deficiencies, if their licenses have been suspended. You want to understand what the scope of their services are and how they work. I have looked at the work of some of these consultants. So, your annual amendment, for example. I had a client send us the questionnaire he completed for his annual amendment, and it was 6 questions long, which is ridiculous because Part 1 of Form ADV alone is like 36 pages once you go through all the different questions. So for a questionnaire to only have 6 questions, and that's meant to be enough information to do your update, is ridiculous. If you look at what you're being provided, if you get a template and it doesn't go over what your business model is or the services you provide, you want to push back and ask questions. And you want to get reviews from other people. What we have found working with our advisors is that the same names come up in terms of what we call third-rate providers, people that shouldn't be doing compliance for advisors but do. The same names tend to come up. And even with these bigger firms, the same issues tend to come up. So you want to get on Google, look at reviews. You want to talk to your other advisors, see who they're using, what firm they're using, and really, truly vet the provider.
This is the second installment of our interview with Leila Shaver. If you missed Part 1, visit our website. Stay tuned for Part 3, coming soon. If you'd like to receive more insightful tips about growing your business, sign up for Folio Institutional's blog at info.folioinstitutional.com/blog. Neither Folio Institutional, its parent, Folio Financial Incorporated, or any sister companies have a contractual relationship with Leila Shaver.